everyone, Jess here from the Scrappy Sisters, and I am participating in the wonderful Natalie Bowers Scraptember January stash bust. Sorry, that was a little bit of a mouthful. So Scraptember January stash bust, and my stash item is numbers. So I dug into my collection of chipboard, my collection of pre-cut die cuts, all of that kind of bits and bobs you have lying around, wood veneer. And I found all the little leftover numbers that I had sitting around not being used. And I have grabbed all of those. So I've got a whole bunch of these flat, shiny gold numbers. I've got a very small amount of gold glitter numbers. I've got a few large chipboard numbers like that number 5. I've got a few of the sort of white and pink chipboard numbers. And I have probably about 20 of the wood veneer, quite really thick wood veneer numbers. And these have been sitting in my stash for so long, like years and years and years. So I thought it was time to get these going. So I've just mixed a little bit of PVA glue with water. I have stuck a small section of Cocoa Vanilla Studios Bohemian Dreams paper, sort of not in the middle of my page, sort of with a larger piece on the right and a smaller piece on the left, as you can see. And I filled that whole piece on the right with numbers, and I'm now about to fill the whole piece on the left with numbers. So I'm just using up most of the scraps I have left of the gorgeous Bohemian Dreams collection. And this was the largest piece of paper that I had, so I'm just using that up now. And yeah, using every single one of these numbers to fill in sort of like the borders, I guess, up and down the sides of the page. Once I have finished gluing all these down, I leave that to dry. It does warp the page a tiny bit. It does flatten back out once it's dried a little bit. And then I get out my Montmartre gesso. Now, for those of you that follow my channel, I am one who usually says, I don't own any gesso. Guess what someone got for Christmas? So Katie finally came through with the goods and got me gesso for Christmas. Yay! And she actually got me a new texture paste and a set of palette knives. So I am set. So what I have done is I've just gone over all the numbers in a light coating of gesso with a rough paintbrush. And now I'm just using a sponge to sort of fluff it out a little bit to sort of soften the look, especially along the edges. I didn't want harsh lines, like a harsh straight line to show, here I've done paint here and now suddenly it's stopped. I really wanted it to sort of smooth out a little bit. So I've done both sides now, and I'm just softening where that sort of bleeds in onto the paper. Once that had dried, I did do a second coat. So that is 2 coats of gesso. And then I mixed together my Kaisercraft Marine Blue with just another crimson acrylic paint that I got from the reject shop. Then I'm just really lightly, with not very much paint on my brush at all, diagonally sweeping across the numbers. I deliberately did a diagonal motion. I didn't start with a diagonal motion and then realized that looked a little bit off because of the direction of the lines on the paper. So diagonal motion across there. And then I'm just putting a border, but only on where the numbers are. So that sort of middle section where the pattern paper is, I'm not inking the edge of that paper at all. And so just really lightly brushing across those numbers. It kind of highlights the numbers again in the layout, even after you spend all that time gessoing them to soften them down. But I really love the look that gives to the different, you can really see the different layers that are happening there. While I was digging in my chipboard stash, I found these old chipboard letters that I've never used yet, and I thought they were a really nice big size to sort of offset all of the numbers that were used on there. I wanted large a large title, so that didn't get lost in amongst all the numbers. But it was the wrong color, so I'm just dunking those in the leftover paint, to just change them to that same color as the paper. I sort of tried to color match the paper and the same color as the paint on the numbers, and then I pop that aside to dry. Now the word 1 with the really thick paint takes a very long time to dry. It takes nearly 3 days to dry. We do not have warm weather at the moment. So I do end up smudging it a little bit, the paint on the number 1, because I couldn't wait and I just had to get going. So it is still a little bit wet at this moment. So I'm still just using my watered down water and PVA because I don't want to waste it, to adhere any bits and pieces that I might need to add on to my layout. I've backed my photos in white and then a really light blue and then sort of a purpley blue color that is a really perfect color match to the diagonal stripes in the page. And then I've pulled out the ephemera from the Bohemian Dreams collection. Now I did actually get this collection in a kit, so there are a few other bits and pieces of ephemera in the collection that you can see over to the right, but I don't think I use any of those in this layout. So I do think this layout is just using the Bohemian Dreams ephemera, but I will shout out if I see anything else pop up that is from some other place. So I'm now just busy creating my clusters around my photos. As you can see, these photos are celebrating my little man's first birthday. He turned 1 in September, so these photos are a little bit behind, but not too bad. With our advent calendar series, I got way behind in scrapping for myself and did obviously all of Katie's advent calendar and then any of my design team commitments and then not really much else. And it's now, as we know, January, and I haven't scrapped for I think a month and a half, and I'm in a little bit of a funk. So this is my very first layout in about a month and a half, and it was very challenging. It was really hard to get going. I had to force myself to get scrapping. And at first it was not very enjoyable making myself do it, but it's come together really, really, really nicely. And it was a really great way to use up a whole bunch of stash that would normally just be sitting in a cupboard, sitting in a box, not being used. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm happy that I'm slowly digging through this Bohemian Dreams collection. This is one of my favorite Coco Vanilla Studio collections. I probably have enough for 1 or 2 more layouts actually, just not very much pattern paper, but with the ephemera there I probably have enough. So I might need to do a few more layouts with this and get some more mixed media happening to fill up the background, or just jump into my pattern paper stash and find something else that matches. So busy popping all of my ephemera down, I decided to just go for it and put my title number 1 on the page, even though it's still wet, because it was really hard trying to work around where it was going to go. You can see it's still a bit shiny and a bit wet, so I am trying to be really careful. The O in the number 1 has been quite smudged, so it may need a touch up later, but I'm really impatient and I'm worried if I put the heat gun to it, it'll bubble because of the finish that was originally on the numbers. It was like a shiny chipboard, and so I'm just rolling with it and trying not to touch them too much and get blue all over my fingers that I then transfer onto the ephemera. So this big long arrow is actually from the exclusive cut apart sheet from my kit. And so are the little, almost like travel arrows, like icons that say, you are here. There's a little pink one, there's a little purple one, and there'll be a little blue one as well by the time I'm finished. You can see one over on the left-hand side in that cluster near the word favorite. They are also from the exclusive cut apart sheets, but everything else is from the ephemera pack. So just popping all of my little clusters down now. Lots of layers sticking out behind the photos. I really felt when I was making this that it had a monochromatic feel to it, which is really silly because there's clearly more than one color in there. But it really felt like a very sort of pinky purple, whatever you would call that color, and blue layer. But obviously there's so many more colors than that, you know, when you look at the flowers. But it just sort of had that feel to me. I really wanted to put something else in that cluster. And at first I was going to use the words. I really liked the words, and I thought the sentiment itself was really nice. But for some reason at the time it just looked, maybe it looked too big, or it just wasn't sitting right. So I end up fussy cutting this little bird out of its piece of ephemera, and I think that's a bit better. I don't know, I can't decide now. I like it and I'm happy with it. But when I look at the wording piece there, I think that worked as well. So I think either actually would have been fine. So just pulling out the enamel dots, I was really tossing up between using the love hearts and using the dots because the hearts are super cute, and I totally could have mixed them and done both. But in the interest of bashing my stash, I end up just putting all of the dots out on the page and getting those bashed. So next time I will definitely use the hearts. I was just packing up and found this little sort of bluey purple coloured circle pointer arrow thing, and I decided I have 3 photos, so I'd really like 3 of those pointing to the people in the photo. So I just swapped those around a little bit because that original one was basically all the same colors together. So I'm happy with how that looks now. So here are my close-ups. You can really see the texture that those numbers bring to the layout, the different heights, the different texture and finish on them, and I really, really love the way this turned out. So make sure you hop on over to the next person participating in this hop, the Stash Busters for January Scraptember, and thank you so much for watching. Bye everyone.